Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Jan-Ole Gerster, a writer and director whose films include A Coffee in Berlin and Lara. His latest, Islands, stars Sam Riley as Tom, a British expat working as a tennis instructor at a Mediterranean resort, enjoying the routines of empty pleasure, until a woman shows up with her husband and their son, and he thinks she seems a little familiar. And then the woman's husband disappears, and Tom finds himself a part of the investigation, even though he's not really sure why. It's a spare, rewardingly complex character study that pulls you in even as it holds you at a distance, and it's now available on digital and on demand in the US and Canada. You should check it out. Jan-Ole picked another complex character study, Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, which introduced the world to Robert De Niro's seething loner Travis Bickle, an ex-Marine who's come back from Vietnam to drive a cab in New York, where he gets tangled up in the lives of his passengers and becomes obsessed with Sybil Shepherd's Betsy, who works for Senator Charles Palantine, and Jodie Foster's Iris, an underage sex worker who works for a guy called Sport. Winner of the Palme d'Or at Cannes, Taxi Driver was embraced by critics and audiences around the world, ultimately nominated for Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actor for De Niro, Best Supporting Actress for Foster, and Best Original Score for Bernard Herrmann. 50 years later, instead of feeling dated, it feels like it saw the future. This is Someone Else's Movie.
600 episodes and no one picked Taxi Driver. That's
11 years.
I think I'm more terrified now because I try to think of a reason why people avoid talking about Taxi Driver. Maybe because, everything has been said about this film already. But to be honest, the reason why I picked Taxi Driver, there are many reasons why I picked Taxi. First of all, it's really one of the films that changed my mind, because I think Taxi Driver is partly responsible for the fact that I wanted to learn more about cinema. Not necessarily become a director, because I was too young to consider this being a real job for me. But I was very young and I grew up. I don't want to bother you or bore you with the details about my biography, but I grew up in a sleepy little town in West Germany, and there was nothing much going on. But we had a little video rental store, and films became the window to the world for me. And I was watching all the Hollywood blockbusters from that time. And I think for some reason I ended up watching Taxi Driver for the first time. And it was the first film that made me want to watch it again right away. And I was a bit confused why it moved me so much and what it did to me and why I was so involved with this Travis Bickle kind of guy. And I think ever since I watched that film for the first time, I watched it many times again. And I think for me, Taxi Driver was the reason why I started to become a cinephile and read about films and developed an interest and a curiosity about the history of cinema.
How old were you? You said you were young, but how young?
14, maybe, early teenager.
So still old enough to understand it. It wasn't overwhelming.
It's not that I was 8. Me and the kids in the neighborhood, we watched all the films we were not supposed to watch, horror movies and action films. We started early, but I think when I watched Taxi Driver, I must have been 13, 14, something like this.
Yeah. It's fascinating. People often talk about, on this podcast specifically, people talk about the experience of seeing a film that made them understand that movies are made, like they are created by people with vision and aesthetic and meaning and intention, as opposed to this is on TV, I can like it. And absolutely, I can understand Taxi Driver being such a transformative moment. It was like that for me as well. It was first saw it on video, took years before there was even a way to see it theatrically, because it was really, in Canada, it was one of 4 films from Columbia TriStar Home Video that was almost impossible to find here. It had to be imported. It was that, and Close Encounters was another. I've never figured it out. I think they were just early licenses somehow that didn't have domestic clearance for Canada, just in the US. There were 2 others that weren't as important, but Taxi Driver and Close Encounters with the two for me. I wonder if Julia Phillips produced both of those. Maybe there's something to do with that. But it was impossible to find here, and so it would show up on pay television every now and then, which is the first how I saw it the first time. And theatrical screenings were in Ontario restricted, meant you could not get in if you were 18, even with a parent or guardian. So that was off the table for me. So the only way I could see it was to keep an eye out and jump on these cable airings until I could finally get a cassette of my own.
I also had a cassette at one point, but unlike you, I had to watch it in German because it was dubbed.
That was my next question. Yeah.
No, no, no. There was no way. I mean, we're talking about mid 90s, and there was no way to. This was before DVD and
Mm-hmm.
everything. Choose the language and the subtitles and everything. There was no Netflix. There was no nothing. There was like German video, like video cassettes in German language, dubbed by God knows who. And so I had quite a few experiences with, rediscovering films in the original language. Another movie I love to talk about because it was so important to me is Fargo, and Fargo has this what they call Minnesota
Minnesota
politeness,
Nice, the accent.
Minnesota nice, which of course I didn't get. First of all, because I'm not American, but second, because I had to watch all these films in German. Can you imagine Pulp Fiction, Fargo, and Taxi Driver? But no, I mean these are undestroyable films, even though you don't hear the original voice from De Niro, which now to me is like a surreal, weird thought because ever since I moved to Berlin, I never ever again watched anything not in the original language because here I had access to cinemas that would show original versions. Plus, DVD became a big thing, and yeah. But I had to watch all these great masterpieces in German, and maybe this is a good moment to share a little anecdote because in my first film, I had to struggle with one of the actors. We were supposed to shoot a film in a car. They were driving around, and he kind of had problems with the scene I wrote for him, and he refused to say the lines. He was like stubborn. He was like, I can't do this. I can't say this. I can't do that. And we had it all set up. It was like, the camera was in the car. Everybody was, getting nervous. And I grabbed a piece of paper and I wrote down a few lines from Travis Bickle while he was riding through New York City. It was like, one day the rain will come and wash all the scum on the street, but in German. And it ended up in the film. And I think this is to answer your first question, why I maybe feel comfortable to talk about Taxi Driver because it's like one of the few films I really watched over and over again. Even though it's also a bit terrifying because it's such a masterpiece and there are only a few films that have been written about so much, but I will give it a try.
Well, I'm happy you're up for it. And really ultimately this is going to be your experience of the film and your interpretation of it anyway. So it is
Yeah.
genuinely nothing no one else will be able to say. And coming at it the way you did, I saw a handful of dubbed films, but it was, in Canada, we were lucky enough, even the VHS tapes of foreign language films would be subtitled most of the time. And it is such a uniquely American work as well. So how, it's sort of a post-Vietnam character study. It's a psychological thriller. The level of violence was such that mainstream audiences were genuinely shocked by the last 10 minutes. And there's plenty of other theoretical violence and aggression sort of bubbling throughout the film. How did that play for you? Was it in the 90s?
It became all the layers of the film. I didn't like intellectually, understood every little aspect about the film. I was a teenager. To me, it was a film about somebody who's I guess maybe not even I wasn't intellectually reflecting about it, but I guess the thing that made me engage with the film was this guy who was desperately trying to connect with the world, and he seemed to fail and he tried to find an exit uh, an entry into the world around him, and I was mesmerized by the visual style of the film. I also had an obsession with New York because as a West German kid, New York in the 90s was like the ultimate dream of everyone, and this was a different kind of New York. This wasn't the Seinfeld New York, let's say.
Sure.
It was a different New York. It looked uh like a jungle, adventurous and dangerous, and also like a little hostile. And I responded to that. I also kind of realized at a very early stage, I think that there, I'm not quite sure if I remember correctly, but I think I have heard about the famous scene where he's like talking to himself in the mirror in different contexts. So I had an awareness that Taxi Driver had a massive impact on pop culture as well. That this scene seemed seems to be seemed to be important for many other filmmakers or, cartoon artists or whatever. So yeah, I can't really say. It became bigger and bigger, and I have to say I rewatched it again the other night, and I'm very happy that I still loved it. And I made a interesting realization about my own work when I watched Taxi Driver again. Because, like I said, back then I watched it a few times, but I just revisited it like the day before yesterday. But I think before then I just watched it like 10 years ago for the last time. So I had a little fresh up. And I'm writing a script right now, and I'm having a hard time convincing the investors about the end of the script because it's not quite sure whether it is a fantasy, a dream, a near-death experience. Like there's people have the urge and they want to understand on an intellectual, rational level what the ending is about. And I think me as a writer, have an idea about it, but also I don't want to give away the idea of it in a, let's say, like explanatory way. And this is a little bit the thing I have to deal with now, in order to, pull the money together for my new film. And then I watched Taxi Driver, and I just realized that there's a huge similarity. Um, to the ending, which I kind of didn't remember. Like when after the big showdown, when he's shooting the pimps and he's bleeding, and the cops show up, I kind of forgot about the epilogue where we hear Iris's parents sending him a letter, turning him into this American hero who saved their daughter. And then he's hanging out with Wizard and all the colleagues at this night diner where the taxi drivers would gather. And they look up to him. And he looks like, for the first time, he looks like he slept. Let's put it this way. Like he had a good night's sleep. He looks all fresh. He's smiling. He's soft. And then he gets into his cab, and there she is. Betsy is in the back seat looking at him, via the review mirror. And I was a bit embarrassed because I didn't really remembered a lot from that ending. For me, the movie always ended with him being back in the cab, but not so much as a version of his ultimate dream, what he wanted his life to be. Somebody who can be charming and flirty with women, and being admired for the hero that he is. And so I felt very connected, and also surprised how deep this movie seemed to be inside of my DNA as a filmmaker by now, that I kind of quote the ending without being even aware that I quoted. And this was a good and nice surprise. It's a very different thing, and still it's similar. And therefore, I'm very thankful that this podcast made me watch it again, because I felt like Marty and I, we're soulmates. Not so much, but yeah.
No, no, I see what you're saying, and I'm happy to provide that service. The other thing is, like, it is such an eerie ending, that coda, that
Yeah.
even, I mean, Scorsese and Schrader used it again in Last Temptation of Christ. I mean, it pre-existed, it was in the book, but the sense that this might not be real, this might be just the sputtering in his brain before. I don't think it is. I think in Last Temptation, it's absolutely like, it's the temptation. It's Satan's induced hallucination of Christ on the cross. But what we see in Taxi Driver, I think you could argue that it's a fantasy, except for the ending, which just says the triggers hit again, and now the cycle starts all over. Because Travis Bickle is someone who is depicted throughout the film as a time bomb. Like, he is always going to go off, and the thing that fascinates me every time I watch it is that I'll see another scene early in the film, usually in the first act, where De Niro is doing something that doesn't look aggressive but absolutely is. He's always, like, positioning himself in a space to lunge forward or leap forward, even when he's jamming his hands into his pockets and trying to be small and unthreatening. There's a wiriness, there's a tension
Yes, you're right.
that is absolutely terrifying. You're watching someone look for an excuse, and when he finds Iris, like, the combination of meeting Iris and being rejected by Betsy, I think, is the thing that really sends him going. But seeing Betsy at the very end and having that pleasant moment with her, and then flipping the mirror up again and letting us, and having Scorsese give us that angle on him and letting us see what's in his eyes, is just absolutely
Which shot are you talking about? You mean
the
like after he and Iris went for breakfast,
no, the very end, with when Betsy gets out of the cab
or when Betsy? Yeah, yeah,
and
okay.
he flips up the rearview mirror. But his first rampage is precipitated by, realizing that Betsy doesn't want anything to do with him. And then he pivots to focusing on saving Iris, which has always sort of been bubbling in the back of his head. But it isn't until then that he understands. Like, first there's the kind of the half attempt of assassinating Palantine, which doesn't really work because he is, again, such an obvious freak that the Secret Service wants nothing. Like, everybody is just watching him by the time he shows up with his mohawk. Um, but it's just these levers or dominoes shifting as he tries to figure out what his best path is. It's no, dominoes is the wrong. It's one of those pachinko games where the ball drops through the maze
Yeah.
and has no, like, as much as you play with the flippers, you can't really change its gravity. That's what Travis Bickle is. He's the ball,
Yeah.
and he's barreling towards violence. And in that first third, where even that first line where he just casually says to Wizard, "Oh, I don't sleep nights," it sounds like he's challenging him to call him a liar. Like, there's this posturing behind everything he does. Like, he wants a fight but can't have it.
I have a different, I think like for me, this is like the one time where everything could have turned well for him because this is a scene where the way I read it, he really, for the first and only time, tries to express how he feels, and he's almost seeking for help. You mean
Mm.
like when he's outside with Wizard and he says like, "I have this crazy thoughts," and and Wizard is like all clumsy, trying to make conversation, and he says has this weird monologue and tells him, "You are a taxi driver, and then you become the taxi driver. This is what you do," and he tries to give him some comfort. He senses that there's something troubling him. I think this is the one of the few scenes in the film that deeply move me, like where I see a struggling guy who's desperately trying to talk to someone, but they both have a hard time to express their inner lives, And I think it's also the moment because you talked about the little moments, like everything that he does in the film is already a little bit dangerous and something I also almost forgot about is this amazing moment when he puts this tablet into the glass of water and sees this Alka-Seltzer or aspirin tablet
The Fizz, yeah.
dissolve. There is, I mean, it's metaphorically, it's so powerful and strong because it says something about his mind and his soul, dissolving. But I forgot about it. I was like surprised how powerful this like two shots. It's just like a close up of him looking at this thing and the glass of water. But yeah, it's there's plenty of amazing moments, scenes, shots. The telephone scene. I think many people wrote about this amazing idea of tracking away with the camera from him while he's on the phone with Betsy. Who you remember that shot? He's on in like some corridor, maybe I think it's some phone booth, and we see him from behind how he's talking to try to convince Betsy, and he's all sorry for taking her to the wrong film, and she tries to get rid of him, and then the camera moves away from him, and we just see the empty corridor for a while until he hangs up and walks into the corridor and away from the camera. And this is such a simple but unbelievably powerful shot idea. It's like really amazing.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, subscribers to the paid tier got my exclusive review of Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day in Friday's What's Worth Watching dispatch, and if you missed it, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io and get caught up. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. Yeah, it's almost as though the movie can't bear to watch him in this moment. He's too vulnerable and too awkward and desperate. I mean, maybe that is the lowest point in the film. And when he comes back into frame, he's changed his trajectory. He's decided that he needs to find another way. The sympathy the movie extends to Bickle, even as he gets worse and worse and worse, is the most compelling thing for me. Just De Niro doesn't pretend. He's not trying to be liked, except when Travis is trying to be liked, and then that's almost unbearably uncomfortable as well. He plays someone who doesn't know how to navigate social situations, and maybe he used to, maybe he did before he went to Vietnam, but probably not. Like, he was probably always the awkward guy. But what he's become on his return is such a mess of raw nerves and exposed wiring, I guess. You see him react to things that he registers that no one else does, and it's impossible to tell if that's PTSD or if it's just his own inability to read social cues. The scene we were talking about with Wizard is what I see is Peter Boyle extending compassion and kindness and trying to pull this guy out and not quite getting there, and then trying a different tack and then trying a different tack. But yeah, he's always there for Travis. He's someone who could help steer him in the right direction. But what we see over and over and over again is that the world won't let him. I mean, Travis hates New York. He hates the job of a taxi driver. He hates his fares. That whole, that speech about sometimes I wipe off the blood. It's delivered in a measured voice because it's his diaries, but he's not trying to get to know the people at all. And of course, they don't want to get to know him either. And when they do, it's for the most horrific thing, like Scorsese's Passenger. His monologue is absolutely vile. But it is the world that Travis is soaking in. So of course, nothing is therapeutic to him, right? The job doesn't help. Nothing helps. And so when he reaches his lowest point, we understand exactly how he got there.
What is in your opinion, how is this relating to him being a war veteran? Paul Schrader was in Vietnam, wasn't he?
Was he?
I thought he
may well have been. You know what? I actually don't know that. I thought he went to college and was stayed in Jesuits and philosophies and things and didn't go to war. Let me just quickly. Yeah, I have his bio. Let me just quickly check.
I'm confusing this with Oliver Stone's biography.
Stone, definitely. That was his whole deal. No, he was never in Vietnam. As far as I can tell, he never actually served, but that's not a negative. It's just his history. Um, no, yeah, no, did not serve, but he knew a lot. I believe he knew a lot of veterans, or at least immersed himself in their culture while he was working on the second draft of the film. The first draft he wrote in some kind of white heat over 2 weeks after an ulcer, uh, and came out trying to purge. I think the way he described it was that he tried to purge whatever poisons the ulcer had left inside of him by writing the script, and it didn't work because then he had to write it again and craft a narrative for it. But it was an idea that would not let go, and it was. I mean, if he wrote it in the mid '70s, the war was still going on, right? Like Nixon didn't get America out of Vietnam until '74, I think it was, and America did not deal with those veterans well at all. And so Travis feeling even more removed and isolated, and then continuing to wear his the army coat, to identify himself as a veteran is going
This
to.
almost seems sometimes that he reflects about that this New York that he's experiencing now is if it's that he was fighting for,
He
right? Like,
believes that, yeah,
yeah,
and no
like
one's
these.
grateful, right? There's no one
Someone's
thanking him.
grateful, everyone's crazy and hostile and aggressive and shady. Yeah, he seems to have some kind of morale and idea of what the world should look like according to him, and what he finds is the complete opposite of what he thought he was fighting for in that war.
Yeah, it is fascinating that ultimately he does, the vigilante actions he takes, they're horrible and violent and abominable, but they are in service of what, because of the film even confirms this. If you step back, it looks like a moral decision. It looks like he did the right thing just because he targeted bad people. In this case, saving Iris is the kind, like, he'd be a folk hero now. It's a few years later, the Bernard Getz subway shooting in New York. The thing nobody talks about is that he was looking for some black people to shoot, which was exactly what he did. And that gets washed away behind the legend of, look at this guy, he did the thing everybody wants to do, which is take action against the intimidation and violence on the subway. It's like, yes, but this is not a hero. This is not a person you want to canonize. Travis is the exact same, without the racial aspect, but it is exactly the same. He went after people who were seen as lesser than and awful, but that was just luck.
Yeah, and I think the movie also says something about the thin line because he was close to, becoming a political assassin,
Mm-hmm.
right? We see him approaching the presidential candidate, and um, I think that also the ending and the monologue of the parents' letter in the voiceover is almost like an ironic comment on that. Like we
Oh yeah.
watched somebody who was so close to shoot at a political figure and then is being celebrated as a hero. Yeah,
Yeah. And open fire in a crowd too. Like, it wasn't just going to be Palantine. He was going to kill a lot of people.
yeah.
And and somehow in all that tension and all that simmering ugliness, I don't want to overlook the fact that Albert Brooks is in there being Albert Brooks. Like, he is giving a real performance in character, but it's also a natural comedian changing, like, deflating the tension in various scenes in Palantine's offices.
Oh, he's the guy in the office with
Yes,
Sybil
he,
Shepherd.
he works with Betsy. Yeah.
Albert Brooks. Okay, okay.
A filmmaker in his own right, a comedian, someone who was known in 1976 exclusively for comedy. Like, it was weird and destabilizing seeing him in
The
this film.
comedy or movies.
I don't think he'd made a movie on his own yet, but he'd been releasing comedy albums that were quite popular. He was on talk shows, so everyone would have known him in America. And he'd been making short films for Saturday Night Live since '75. So,
Know his name, but the Saturday Night Live unfortunately was never a thing on German TV. So I
mhm.
know how huge it is and what it means for so many careers, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, but it never was. It was never on German TV, and
No,
maybe that.
sure. But by the time you would have seen Taxi Driver, you might have come across maybe Lost in America or Defending Your Life, or he's in broadcast news. He's the third lead in that. But he is primarily a comic actor. And when I did finally see Taxi Driver on film, um, in a theater with an audience, the first time he shows up, people kind of giggled because they were obviously seeing the film for the first time. I really envy that experience, seeing it in the theater
The
in the
same, I
dark.
think it's the same with oh God, what's his name? King of Comedy.
Jerry Lewis.
Henry Lewis, yeah, yeah. And I like how Scorsese dealt with the idea that people think a comedian is always funny, no matter where you approach him in the street, on the toilet, public toilet. Everybody expect them to be funny all the time. And I like the idea of casting Jerry Lewis in that film, who's just bothered by all these people wanting autographs and pictures and whatnot. And he's just, this persona on stage, but not in real life. It's a very clever cast, I'd say.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite moment in that movie is when the woman turns on him and just starts screaming, "You should get cancer," in the middle of the street. It's so frightening, but it's also so like genuine. It's like that moment of the social relationship just turning.
Yeah, I mean, it's so well observed, and both De Niro and Scorsese seem to know very well what they are talking about. There's a similar moment in Birdman, by the way, when he's like has to, you know, walk down Broadway just in his underpants, and people yell at him, "You
That's
suck." They
great.
want to do a picture first, and when he keeps going, they insult him. It's like the whole madness about being a public figure is in that scene. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, Scorsese has always had this innate understanding of sounds pompous, but the American character, like the idea of being out among people and trying to have your own story in the middle of these massive teeming spaces. Taxi Driver, I think, isolates Travis just by virtue of his job, and he's always alone, even when he's with people. And the sense that the culture, like the city is teeming and busy, but we never see anybody. It's always just sort of pressing in on the
He's like,
windows.
he's like I don't know. The taxi is almost like a spaceship or his little safari jeep, while he's like, being all by himself driving through the jungle. There's something always that keeps him detached from the world around him, but still he observes these things. He notices things that nobody else notices, and this builds such a intense atmosphere, like just the way he looks at the people around him. I think there's also this shot when he's talking to Withered for the first time at the diner, where these pimps sit in the same place, and like the cab drivers talking to each other, but it's just Travis who's like noticing what's going on at the other tables,
Hmm.
and all these con connections he makes by looking at people and them looking back at him. It builds up such a dangerous, uncomfortable atmosphere. Like really, and there's something, it's something about Scorsese that also, by the way, in the way he directs films and he shapes the cinematic language of a film, that makes him like a co-writer almost. There's a true authorship to the way he directs. I mean, it's being referred to as a Scorsese film, but let's face it, it's a Paul Schrader script, and it's a brilliant script. I almost feel bad for Paul Schrader that when people talk about Taxi Driver, everybody's talking, "Oh yeah, Scorsese is such a brilliant director," and it's a Scorsese film. I mean, like I'm a director. I will not live to the day until somebody offers me a script like Taxi Driver. That's it's like winning the lottery. But what I'm trying to say is he elevates it to something that is maybe even bigger than the script, and that has to do with the way he finds always the perfect angle and the perfect shot, and the atmosphere. And we haven't talked about the music yet. The music is I mean, like when I think about the music, to me it seems like the movie only has these two themes, like this rather dark one, which has this character, this rather dangerous tone to it, but also this sleazy saxophone strip bar theme, which you never get tired of hearing. It's like it feels like it comes like every 2 minutes, like da 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 da. But it's beautiful, and it also sets this, I don't know, this sexual vibe, or the sexually aggressive vibe, which is also such an important color in the film, like the sexual aggression that is being communicated through the world around Travis, that he tries to understand and he can't. He doesn't really know how to talk to women, even though I think like the purest Travis we see throughout the whole film is when he asks Betsy out for coffee. I mean, this is like one of the few moments where he really seems to be a charming, funny, self-confident guy. I really like that scene, and I think, yeah, well, maybe that's the reason why Betsy goes out with him in the first place. But this is like, I think, the purest Travis we see throughout the whole film when he goes into that office, into that election campaign office, and asks Betsy out for coffee and cake.
Yeah. And I think he genuinely is showing her his best self, but he can't
It's weird
sustain it.
because, yeah, because you get the sense that he knows how to, you know, talk to a woman that you haven't met before, and he walks in and is charming and self-confident, and then the next thing he does, he takes her to that horrible film
Yeah.
like a naive idiot, right? Pretending it's the most normal thing to do. He seems so self-confident in this one scene and so helpless and awkward and clumsy in that other. It's something I can't really bring together, but it still makes sense and expresses so much about his character and his naiveness in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's giving us a sense of the person he was before he went to war in that first scene. And then the second scene is he came back with nothing. Like he didn't learn anything about, he didn't grow. He didn't get the chance to, like, he must have gone when he was a kid because he's not that old. And now he's back and he has no developmental skills. He has no, yeah, he can't read a room. He can't understand. And when he says something like lots of couples do this, I think that's the line. That always
Yeah.
struck me as his attempt to both shut her up and like keep her in the theater, keep her from leaving, but also just assert that this is normal. Like this is a thing he thinks is normal. And so they do this. And I don't think he gets anything out of the film either. He's not enjoying himself. He's just doing a thing that he thinks couples do on a date.
I think this is why I pity why we pity him after all. I mean, like, he's like really, he seems helpless, but also desperate at the same time to, be a part of the human community, which and I think it's interesting that you keep mentioning the war and what the war did to him and how he might have been before the war. I also just realized when I watched the movie again that there's this massive scar on his back, which almost symbolizes the things that he might saw in the war that he had to experience, and that might have changed him and turned him into who he is now, somebody who's like dead inside to a certain degree, pretending to be alive and among the living, but can't really make connection.
Yeah. It's also 50 years later we're living with this entire incel movement and men's rights and all that nonsense, and he's the poster boy. This is a guy who would fit right in, and that's even more terrifying now than I think it was in 1976.
I think maybe this is not that I also reflected about it, but I had no clue about the whole war background, I think, when I watched it back then. But um, like you said, there's something so iconic about this character. He's like the ultimate anti-hero. To me, he's up there with Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. It expresses so much about um, wounded masculinity, toxic masculinity, men that try to find purpose and attention and admiration in life, and what it does to them if they can't find it. The movie is shockingly precise about that aspect of masculinity, and like you said, we have to deal with it in a way that we didn't see coming to that degree, right? Like it's shocking how this um, misogynist movements are growing and growing, and how much of this threat towards women was already in that character. And that reminds me of something that stuck with me when I saw the poster for the first time, because there are several posters from the US release, but one poster said something like, in every street, in every city, there's a nobody who's dreaming of being somebody. He's a lonely, forgotten man, desperate to prove the world that he's alive or something. You remember that one?
Vaguely, yeah. It's not the original poster, but I think it was when it started to become a cultural thing. They really started to push the angle on it. And
Yeah.
certainly, like Schrader over and over writes these scripts about God's lonely man. The what is it? Light Sleeper with Willem Dafoe and First Reformed with Ethan Hawke. He's pursued this idea and unpacked it and repacked it over. He almost exclusively doing it now with The Card Counter and Master
Underrated
Gardener.
film. First Reformed is such a good film. But
Yeah.
did you like it
Oh, I
or not?
loved it. Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed him on that one, and we talked about that. I'd also spoken to him when Light Sleeper came out, and we talked about this sort of evolving sense of men who are compelled to act, but the world keeps changing. And so what it is that drives the action for him anyway as a screenwriter is more and more complicated. He has to, like, he realized that it was getting more global, and it's now it's in Taxi Driver, it's one man trying to stop one girl from being exploited, or at least that's how he perceives it. And by the time First Reform comes around 40 years later, it's about someone trying to save the world from itself.
Yeah,
And it always escalates.
such a good writer.
He's great. Yeah.
Light Sleeper is the one with William Dafoe. Is that the one with
Yeah. He's a small time drug runner. It's maybe, what would that have been, 1991 or 1992? Great movie. Almost completely slept on these days.
I rewatched American Gigolo last year, I think.
Oh,
Wasn't crazy about it, but I'm really I should check out Light Sleeper again. I'm not even sure if I've seen it.
it's good. It's
Um,
very, very good. There's an excellent Powerhouse edition from Indicator in the UK.
I will make a little Paul Schrader retrospective in my
It's
place.
it's a good pile to have.
Yeah.
And we are running out of time, so I wanted to pivot and ask about Islands. I keep trying to draw parallels between the film that a person selects and a film that the person has made, and in this case, it's sort of the reverse. This is Sam Riley's character learning to be a person in a way over the course of this experience of a few days. Like, he's someone who's retreated into himself, much like Travis Bickle, but what we're seeing is the cracking of that shell, and someone, my interpretation of the film is that someone is deciding in the end that he wants to be part of the world and he's going to make the effort rather than pivot to violence. It's a different kind of pressure cooker.
It's a different kind of pressure cooker. It's I think more about reconnecting with yourself rather than expressing your rage against the world. So I don't I never thought about making a connection between Taxi Driver and Sam Riley's character in the film. I think like they both in a way seem detached from the world around them. They seem to be a little lost and lonely and alienated. And I think this might be something they have in common. But this is something that is maybe the reason why I was interested in Travis Bickle in the first place when I saw the film, but also in all my previous films. It's always about people who kind of escaped or run away from something and struggle with decisions they made in life and try to avoid the consequences they should address in their life, or like they or to deal with the consequences of the choices they made.
And you've
This
created a world where that happens in this just sort of this sun blasted paradise, as opposed to the smoky dark hell of 1970s New York, which is an instant contrast. So it took me a while to stitch that together.
But still, it kind of feels like a purgatory in the end, with all these drunk people that just, are on constant hedonistic fun level mode. There was one of the goals we had was the film that we opened the film as something that you want to enter, like a world where everything is easy and cool, and people have drinks and do daytime drinking and play tennis and it's flirty, but it more and more starts to feel like hell, like a monotonous loop that you can't escape from. At least our main character. I mean, the movie deals a lot with the idea of escaping, right? Holiday. What is holiday? You escape your everyday life for a couple of days and you pretend to live a better life for a few weeks, and then you have to go back to whatever your life is. And I was interested about those who pretend to be an endless holiday, who live in these places and raise the questions how you can escape from an endless holiday, and what it does to you if every day is the same and every day is in a way empty.
Well, I was going to say that when you said it's a type of hell, it's like, yeah, hell is where you get everything you want, right? And forever, and nothing challenges you and nothing makes you think or question.
I was asking myself, if going to this place is always seem like for people who live in these places, freedom seemed to be a big thing, right? Like I wanted to live a life far away from responsibilities and away from the system. But I also witnessed that a lot of people seem to have a problem dealing with this freedom, and the real life person I met when I started to write this story was an actual tennis coach in one of these islands, and he had to drink from early noon with all his clients. They wanted to do have a drink with him at the bar, and they seemed to be his only social contact. And I started to talk to him at one point, and he kept telling me that he doesn't regret a single day ever since he came to the island, but he kept repeating it to himself like a mantra, like he had to convince himself that he made the right decision. But it was obvious that he was kind of emotionally and socially neglected, that he had an issue with drinking, and that he was still pretending to be in his early 20s, even though he was already in his early 50s. And that these are the characters that get my curiosity, and then it's just a short way from a real life person to getting inspired and turn this experience into a script.
My thanks to Jan-Ole Gerster, whose new film Islands is now available on digital and on demand throughout North America. Thanks also to Jared Clarkson. He knows what he did. Jan-Ole is not on Instagram, but you can keep track of his film at islandsmovie.com, and you can find Taxi Driver on 4K and Blu-ray from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment in a gorgeous restoration. It's also streaming on Crave in Canada and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 40 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.